Aaron sat quietly inside his small ship as it drifted through the endless dark of space. His journey had been long, and he was used to silence, but something felt strange. The sensors on his control screen blinked with a warning. Before he could react, a beam of light wrapped around his ship and pulled it forward. The controls no longer answered his touch. The engines shut down, and the ship glided helplessly toward a massive structure floating in the distance. It was no ordinary station. The shape stretched wide like wings, glowing with golden lines across its surface. Tall spires pointed toward the stars, and huge gates opened slowly as if waiting only for him. Aaron tried to send a signal, but his communicator returned only static. He realized he had no choice. The ship was being drawn in like a fish caught on a hook. Inside the hangar, light poured across the walls. Strange figures stood waiting, their tall bodies shining under the glow. Each carried a staff that hummed with energy. Their eyes were sharp, and their movements strict, as if they belonged to a world where order ruled everything. Aaron stepped out of his ship, his boots echoing on the polished floor. "Human," one of the guards said firmly. "You are summoned before the Queen." Aaron's heart raced. He had heard stories of alien rulers but never imagined standing before one. He was a simple explorer, not a diplomat, not a warrior. Yet now, he was surrounded and guided through long corridors lined with banners that shimmered in shifting colors. Symbols decorated the walls, telling stories of victories and royal bloodlines. The guards stopped before two massive doors carved with silver patterns. With a deep sound, the doors opened, revealing a grand hall. At the far end stood a throne raised high above the floor. Beside it, tall flames flickered, casting shadows across the chamber. Rows of nobles filled the hall, their eyes locked on the lone human who entered. Aaron felt the weight of every gaze pressing down on him. At the center of it all sat the Queen. Her crown rose like a star, and her robe shimmered as if made from liquid light. Her presence alone was enough to silence the hall. Aaron bowed, unsure of the correct gesture but hoping respect would be clear in any form. The Queen's voice rang out, calm yet filled with authority. "Human, do you know why you stand here?" Aaron swallowed and answered softly, "No, my Queen. I was taken without warning. I do not understand." The hall stirred with whispers. The Queen raised her hand, and silence fell once more. Then, from her side, a figure stepped forward. She was tall, graceful, and unlike any being Aaron had ever seen. Her eyes shone like two bright crystals, and her movements carried both strength and kindness. She was the princess. Aaron's breath caught as she walked toward him. She stood close, her voice clear and steady. "Mother, it is him. This is the one I have chosen." Gasps filled the hall. Nobles leaned toward each other, shocked and confused. Aaron's mind spun. Chosen? By the princess? He struggled to understand the meaning of her words. The Queen studied both of them, her gaze sharp as a blade. At last, she spoke, her voice echoing through the chamber. "Human, my daughter has chosen you. By the law of our people, her choice must be heard and respected." The words struck Aaron harder than any storm. He had expected punishment, perhaps judgment, but not this. Every noble in the hall stared at him, their expressions filled with disbelief. Some looked angry, others curious, and some fearful. Aaron stood frozen, his thoughts racing. He was an outsider, a traveler who carried no title, no power, and no claim. Yet here, before an alien empire, he was suddenly tied to a destiny greater than his own. The princess turned to him, her expression calm yet determined. You do not yet understand, but you will. I saw in you something our people have long forgotten. That is why I chose you. Aaron's mouth felt dry. He searched for words but found none. He only bowed his head slightly, hoping it showed respect, though his heart thundered within his chest. Around him, the hall buzzed with quiet unrest. The queen lifted her hand once more, and silence returned. Her gaze locked on Aaron, and though her tone remained steady, there was weight in every word. Human, my daughter has chosen you, and through this choice, your path will change. What lies ahead will test your spirit. You may refuse, but if you accept, you step into a world where your every action will shape the bond between our people. The hall waited for his answer. Aaron stood in the center, small compared to the towering nobles and endless banners, yet somehow all eyes rested on him. He had not asked for this, yet destiny now stood before him. And so began a story that neither human nor alien could have predicted. The hall remained silent after the queen's declaration, but the silence was heavy, filled with judgment and disbelief. Aaron stood in the center, unsure of how to act. His mind kept repeating the same words, "The princess has chosen you." He could not understand what this meant or why it had happened. He was only an explorer from a distant human colony. What reason could a royal daughter have for choosing him? The princess moved closer. Her steps were slow, graceful, and full of purpose. The light from the flames reflected across her silver robe, and her eyes carried a glow that seemed both gentle and powerful. When she stopped in front of Aaron, he finally saw her expression clearly. It was calm, but there was also determination hidden within. "I am Lyra," she said softly, though her voice carried through the hall. "Daughter of the queen. You may not understand my decision, but I have seen something within you that others here cannot see." Aaron lowered his head slightly, unsure how to respond. He did not wish to offend her. "Princess," he said carefully, "I do not know why you chose me. I am no warrior, no leader. I am just a traveler." Lyra tilted her head, studying him with curious eyes. "That is exactly why. Our people admire strength, power, and tradition. But you showed something different. When you were brought here, you did not fight. You did not beg. You walked forward with steady steps, even though fear was in your heart. That balance of courage and humility is rare." The nobles stirred at her words. Some whispered angrily, others scoffed. To them, a human was weak and unworthy. The idea that their princess could find value in such a being seemed almost insulting. One elder noble stood and raised his voice. "Your Majesty," he called to the queen, "this cannot be allowed. The bond of the royal daughter must strengthen our people, not weaken them. A human brings no honor, no advantage, and no future." The queen's eyes narrowed. She raised her hand, silencing him. "The law of choice is ancient," she said firmly. "No voice in this hall may deny it." The noble bowed reluctantly, but his face carried clear displeasure. Others shared his expression, though none dared to challenge the queen directly. Aaron felt the weight of their stares. He wanted to speak, to explain that he had not asked for this, but the words stayed trapped inside him. It was not his place to argue with their customs, nor did he wish to insult the princess who stood beside him. Lyra looked around the hall, meeting the eyes of every noble. "I chose him not because he is strong in body, but because he holds strength of spirit. He is different from us, and that difference is what we need." Her voice carried certainty, and though many still doubted, there was no mistaking her resolve. She turned back to Aaron and spoke quietly so only he could hear. "Do not be afraid. You will come to understand in time." The queen rose from her throne, her tall figure commanding the hall. "The choice has been made," she declared. "But by law, the human must face the trials. If he proves unworthy, the bond cannot stand. If he succeeds, none may deny it." Aaron's chest tightened. Trials. He did not know what they were, but the way the queen spoke made them sound dangerous. Yet when he glanced at Lyra, she gave him a small nod of encouragement, and something in her gaze gave him strength. The queen continued, "Until the trials begin, the human shall remain within the palace. He will be treated with respect, for he stands under the protection of my daughter." Guards approached, not as captors but as escorts. They guided Aaron through another corridor, and Lyra walked beside him. The nobles watched in silence as the human left the hall, carrying with him the weight of an empire's judgment. As they walked, Aaron finally spoke in a low voice. "Princess, I still do not understand. You speak of choice, but why me? Out of all beings in this galaxy, why would you place such faith in a stranger?" Lyra's expression softened. "Because you remind me of something I once believed was lost. When I was younger, I dreamed of a bond built not on power or advantage, but on trust and truth. Among my people, those dreams faded as I grew. But when I saw you, standing in the hall with fear in your eyes yet still showing respect, I remembered those dreams. I knew then it must be you." Her words struck Aaron deeply. He could not say he fully understood, but he felt her sincerity. For the first time since his capture, he sensed that perhaps there was more to this path than chance. They reached a chamber prepared for him, filled with strange designs and glowing lights. As he stepped inside, Aaron turned to Lyra. "Princess, I cannot promise victory in your trials. But I promise that I will face them with honesty." Lyra smiled faintly. "That is all I ask. The rest will follow." When she left, Aaron sat alone, staring at the shining walls. His journey as an explorer had always been about searching for unknown stars. Yet now, he realized, the greatest journey ahead was not through space, but through the heart of a destiny he never expected. And though doubt filled his mind, a small spark of courage began to grow. Morning light spilled through the high windows of the palace, shining across patterns carved into the walls. Aaron stood in the center of a large courtyard, surrounded by rows of guards, nobles, and curious citizens who had gathered to watch. Today was the beginning of his trials. The queen sat upon a raised platform, her presence towering over all. Beside her stood Princess Lyra, her expression calm but her eyes steady on Aaron. She had insisted on being there, even though many nobles whispered that it was not proper for her to watch a human risk failure. The queen's voice rang clear. "By the ancient law, one who is chosen must prove their worth. The trials test the body, the mind, and the spirit. Success brings honor. Failure brings shame. Let it be witnessed by all." A heavy silence filled the courtyard. Aaron took a slow breath. He had faced dangers before in his travels: storms, hunger, the silence of deep space, but never had his fate rested in the judgment of so many eyes. He clenched his hands, reminding himself of the promise he had made to Lyra, to face the trials with honesty, whatever the outcome. The first trial began. From the far end of the courtyard, a gate opened, and strange creatures were released. Their bodies were tall and thin, their limbs long and quick. Each carried no weapon, yet their movements were sharp and fierce. Aaron understood at once, this was a test of endurance, not death. The creatures circled him. Aaron's heart raced, but he forced himself to stay calm. He knew he could not overpower them with strength. Instead, he waited, watching their steps, searching for patterns. When one lunged, Aaron sidestepped and pushed its arm aside, using its speed against it. The crowd gasped. He stumbled often, hit the ground more than once, but each time he rose again. His body ached, yet he refused to stop. After what felt like hours, the creatures withdrew, leaving Aaron standing breathless but still on his feet. The crowd murmured. He had not fought like a warrior, but he had endured, and endurance had meaning. The queen lifted her hand. The first trial is past. Lyra allowed herself a small smile, though her face remained composed before the crowd. Aaron caught her gaze, and in that brief look, he found new strength. The second trial began soon after. Aaron was led into a chamber of puzzles, its walls shifting like a maze. Strange symbols glowed on the floor, and hidden traps triggered when he stepped wrongly. This was no test of muscle but of mind. At first, Aaron was lost. The symbols were foreign, and the walls shifted constantly. But then he remembered the fragments of alien data he had once studied during his travels. Some symbols were similar. Slowly, carefully, he began to match patterns, pressing the right symbols to unlock paths. More than once, he made mistakes. Arrows of light shot dangerously close, forcing him to dive out of the way. But each error taught him more, and soon he moved with growing confidence. Hours later, he stepped out of the chamber, exhausted but alive. The queen's voice rang once more. The second trial is past. This time the crowd's reaction was louder. Some still doubted, but many now looked at Aaron with curiosity instead of scorn. At last, the third and final trial began. Aaron was taken to a dark hall where only a single flame burned in the center. There were no creatures, no puzzles, no traps. Only silence. The queen's voice echoed through the chamber. This is the trial of spirit. You must face yourself. Aaron stood in the silence, unsure what to do. Then, shadows formed on the walls. They shaped into images of his past, his failures, his regrets, his fears. He saw himself walking away from chances he had been too afraid to take. He saw faces of those he had disappointed. The shadows whispered, telling him he was weak, that he did not belong here, that he would never be worthy. For a moment, the weight crushed him. His knees trembled. But then he remembered Lyra's words, "I saw in you something others cannot see." He lifted his head, speaking into the silence. "I am human," he said firmly. "I am not perfect. I fall, I make mistakes, but I rise again. That is who I am. That is my strength." The shadows faded. The flame burned brighter, lighting the hall until it shone with golden light. The queen's voice filled the chamber, strong and clear. The trial of spirit is past. When Aaron returned to the courtyard, the crowd was waiting. Some looked uneasy, others surprised, and a few even cheered. Lyra's eyes glimmered with quiet pride. The queen rose to her feet. The human has faced the trials. By endurance, by mind, and by spirit, he has proven himself worthy. Let none in this hall deny it. The courtyard erupted in sound. Some nobles still shook their heads, refusing to accept, but none could argue with the law. Aaron had passed. He was no longer only a stranger, he was now part of their story. Aaron stood quietly, his body sore, his mind tired, but his heart steady. He had survived not by being the strongest or the smartest, but by being true to himself. And though the path ahead was still uncertain, he felt a spark of hope. Perhaps he truly did belong here, in a destiny larger than anything he had ever imagined. The palace was restless after the trials. Word of Aaron's success spread through the city like fire through dry grass. In every corner, people whispered about the human who had faced the ancient tests and survived. Some were impressed, some doubtful, and many were angry. To them, a human had no place in the affairs of the royal house. In the throne hall, the queen sat with her advisors. Her face showed calm strength, but her thoughts were troubled. She had seen Aaron endure, solve, and rise again. He had proven himself in the eyes of the law. Yet she also knew her empire was filled with voices that would not accept such a result. Lyra stood beside her mother, her gaze steady. She had watched the nobles during the trials. Their expressions had betrayed their thoughts. Envy, anger, and fear had been written clearly on their faces. She knew rebellion brewed in their hearts. That evening, Aaron walked through the palace gardens, guided by 2 guards who were assigned for his safety. The air was calm, filled with the soft glow of floating lights and the gentle sound of running water. For the first time since his capture, he felt at ease. Yet his peace was broken when Lyra appeared, her steps quick and serious. "You must be careful," she said quietly. "Your success has not silenced your enemies. It has only made them louder." Aaron looked at her, confused. "But I passed the trials. The queen herself declared it. What more must I prove?" Lyra shook her head. "For some, no proof will ever be enough. They fear change, and you are the symbol of it. They will not fight you openly while the queen stands, but in the shadows, they plan." Aaron frowned. He had never wanted to become the center of conflict. He had come to explore stars, not to stand in the middle of an empire's struggle. Still, he could not ignore her words. "What do they plan?" he asked. She hesitated, then answered, "Whispers of rebellion. Certain nobles speak in secret, gathering strength. They believe that if they remove you, they will weaken me, and through me, they can challenge my mother." The weight of her words pressed on him. Aaron looked at her with steady eyes. "Then what will you do?" Her voice carried quiet fire. "I will stand with you, as I promised. But you must stand with me as well." In the days that followed, the signs became clear. Servants spoke of hidden meetings. Patrols reported strange movements in the outer districts. Symbols of rebellion were drawn on walls at night, then quickly erased by the guards in the morning. The palace grew tense, and trust became rare. One night, as Aaron rested in his chamber, the light suddenly flickered. A sharp sound followed, and the walls shook. The guards rushed in, pulling him to safety as an explosion echoed in the distance. Flames rose from one of the city's towers. The rebels had made their first move. The queen gathered her council at once. Her voice was calm, but her eyes burned with anger. "They test our strength. They wish to see if we will break. We will not." An elder noble stepped forward, bowing low. His words were smooth, but Aaron felt the false tone behind them. "Your Majesty, perhaps the trouble began only because of the human's presence. If he were sent away, peace might return." The queen's gaze hardened. "The law was fulfilled. He has proven himself. Do you speak against the law?" The noble lowered his head quickly, retreating, but Aaron could see the shadow of defiance in his eyes. Later, Lyra met Aaron in secret. "You see it now," she said. They will not stop. The rebellion grows bolder. They will strike again. Aaron nodded slowly. He felt the truth in her words. He remembered the trial of spirit, where he had faced his own doubts. Now, he faced the doubts of an entire empire. Then I cannot remain silent, he said. If they come for me, I must stand. Lyra's expression softened with pride. That is why I chose you. Not because you are without fear, but because you face it. Days turned into weeks. The city held its breath. Rumors grew like vines, wrapping tightly around every heart. Whispers spoke of a shadow leader guiding the rebels, someone with influence inside the court itself. The queen prepared her guards, but even she knew a greater storm was coming. Aaron trained under the watch of the palace warriors, learning their ways, though his strength was not in weapons. He used his mind, sharing human tactics of misdirection and surprise, which the warriors found strange but useful. Slowly, he began to earn their respect. One evening, as he practiced in the courtyard, a messenger rushed in, his face pale. "Rebels move against the city gates," he cried. "They come with fire and steel." The queen rose, her voice sharp. "Then the storm is here. Let it be met." As horns rang across the capital, Aaron stood among the guards, his heart steady. He knew he was still an outsider, but now he was also something more. The trials had tested his spirit, but the coming battle would test his loyalty. And as the shadows of rebellion spread across the city, Aaron realized that his fate was no longer just his own. It was tied to Lyra, to the queen, and to the future of an empire standing on the edge of war. The sound of war filled the capital. Horns called from the towers, and the deep drums of alarm echoed through the streets. Citizens fled to the inner walls while soldiers rushed to defend the gates. Fire lit the night sky, and the air shook with the clash of steel. From the high balcony of the palace, Aaron watched the chaos unfold. He had faced the trials, but this was different. This was no test created by law. This was rebellion, fueled by hatred and ambition. His chest tightened as he saw flames rising across the lower districts. The queen stood tall, her eyes sharp. "They mean to break us tonight," she said firmly to her commanders. "If the gates fall, the city falls. We hold them, or we lose everything." Lyra turned to Aaron, her voice steady but urgent. "You must stay within the palace walls. You are their target. If they strike you down, they believe they can destroy me as well." Aaron looked at her, shaking his head. "I cannot hide while others fight. If I do nothing, their words will be proven true that I am weak, that I bring only danger." The queen studied him for a long moment, then gave a slight nod. "Very well. But if you stand with us, you must understand, this night may claim your life." "I understand," Aaron replied. His voice did not waver, though his heart beat fast. The gates thundered under the force of the rebels outside. Shadows moved along the walls, and fire arrows streaked through the air. Aaron joined a small group of soldiers at the palace entrance, standing side by side with warriors far stronger than him. He had little armor, only a light blade, but his spirit was steady. The first wave came swiftly. Rebel fighters surged forward, their banners torn and dark. Aaron fought clumsily at first, his strikes lacking the power of trained warriors. But where he lacked strength, he used quick thinking. He tripped one enemy by pulling loose stones underfoot. He distracted another with a sudden shout, giving a guard the chance to strike. Slowly, he learned to move with the flow of battle, supporting others instead of fighting alone. Through the smoke and noise, Aaron saw Lyra on the steps of the palace. A group of rebels had broken through, rushing straight toward her. His blood turned cold. Without a thought, he pushed through the line of guards, racing forward. A blade swung toward the princess, but Aaron threw himself between her and the attack. Pain burned across his arm as steel cut shallow, but he stood firm. With his other hand, he struck the rebel with all his strength, knocking him down. The guards closed in, driving the rest back. Lyra's eyes widened as she looked at him. "You are wounded?" Aaron breathed heavily but forced a smile. "Better me than you." The guards stared in silence for a moment. They had seen his courage with their own eyes. A human who should have been fragile had risked himself without hesitation. Respect grew quietly in their hearts. The battle raged on through the night. The rebels fought with fury, but the defenders held with unyielding strength. Aaron stayed near Lyra, refusing to leave her side. Each time danger came close, he placed himself between her and the threat. His arm bled, his body ached, but his spirit did not break. At last, as dawn began to color the horizon, the rebels faltered. Their leader had not appeared, and without clear command, their strength weakened. The queen's forces pushed forward, driving them from the gates. Horns of victory rang across the city as the remaining rebels fled into the hills. Exhausted soldiers cheered. The capital still stood. The throne still held. Inside the palace, healers tended to the wounded. Aaron sat quietly as his arm was wrapped, his body weary but his mind alert. Lyra stayed beside him, refusing to leave until she saw his wounds cared for. The queen entered, her steps strong though her eyes showed the weight of the night. She looked at Aaron, then at her daughter. "Many doubted you," she said to Aaron. "They saw you as a burden, a weakness. But tonight you proved what law cannot measure. You showed loyalty not in words, but in action." Aaron bowed his head, unsure how to answer. "I only did what I believed was right." The queen's voice softened. "And that is why it was powerful. A warrior fights because it is expected. You fought because you chose to. That choice is what makes you different." Lyra smiled faintly. "I told you, mother. He carries strength of spirit." The queen studied her daughter, then looked back at Aaron. For the first time, her expression shifted from stern judgment to something gentler, though still strong. "Perhaps," she said quietly, "my daughter's choice was not as foolish as many believed." The hall grew silent as her words sank in. Aaron felt a strange warmth in his chest. For the first time since he had been taken, he no longer felt like an outsider. He felt like he belonged not fully, not yet, but enough to stand without shame. Outside, the city was scarred by battle, yet the palace remained unbroken. The rebellion had not ended, but it had been pushed back. The shadow still lingered, waiting, watching. But in the hearts of those who had witnessed the humans' loyalty, a new respect began to grow. And though the war was far from finished, Aaron had passed another trial, one not set by law, but by life itself. The victory at the gates brought relief, but the palace knew peace would not last. The rebels had retreated, not surrendered. Whispers spread quickly through the city that the uprising was guided by someone powerful, someone not outside the walls, but within them. The queen gathered her council in the throne hall. Flames lit the chamber, throwing long shadows across the walls. "The rebels cannot strike so boldly without aid," she said firmly. "There is treachery in this court. We must uncover it before they strike again." Nobles shifted uneasily. Some protested their loyalty, others kept silent. Aaron watched from the side, his arm still wrapped from the wound he had taken while protecting Lyra. He did not speak, but he saw the fear on many faces. He knew fear often hides guilt. Later, Lyra met him in the gardens. Her voice was quiet but heavy with concern. The rebellion is more than anger. It is a plan. They wait for the right moment to strike at the heart of the throne. Aaron frowned. Then the next battle will not be at the gates. It will be here, within the palace. Her eyes held his. Yes. And when it comes, we must stand together. Days passed in uneasy silence. The city repaired its wounds, but the air carried tension. The people spoke of Aaron with growing respect, remembering how he had shielded the princess with his own body. Yet the nobles remained divided. Some began to see his courage, while others still whispered that his presence cursed the empire. Then, one night, the storm broke. Aaron woke to the sound of alarms. The palace shook as explosions echoed through its halls. Guards rushed past his chamber, shouting orders. He seized his blade and ran toward the throne room, knowing at once that this was the moment the rebels had waited for. The throne hall blazed with chaos. Rebels, dressed in stolen armor, poured in through hidden passages. Among them stood nobles who had cast aside their masks of loyalty. At the center of the storm was a tall figure with a silver crest, Lord Varrock, once a respected advisor of the Queen. "You have weakened us with your false laws," Varrock thundered, pointing his blade toward the throne. "You let a human walk among us as if he were worthy. Tonight, we restore strength by taking what is ours." The Queen rose, her eyes burning with fire. "You seek the throne, Varrock, but you will find only ruin." The hall erupted into battle. Guards clashed with rebels, steel striking against steel. The sound of fury echoed through the chamber. Aaron fought beside the palace soldiers, his movements quick and sharp. He was no match for Varrock's warriors in strength, but his human cunning found small victories. He used the pillars for cover, striking from angles the rebels did not expect. Lyra fought too, her staff glowing with radiant energy. She moved with both grace and power, every strike defending those around her. Aaron stayed close, covering her whenever danger drew near. Varrock pushed toward the throne, cutting down any who stood in his path. His strength was overwhelming, and even the Queen's guards struggled to slow him. Aaron saw the danger and knew that if Varrock reached the throne, the rebellion would claim victory. He called to the guards, "Do not fight him directly. Slow him. Break his line. Force him to waste his strength." The soldiers listened, adjusting their defense. They struck and retreated, forcing Varrock to chase, wearing him down. It was a tactic simple in design but clever in execution. Slowly, Varrock's rage became his weakness. At last, Varrock turned his fury on Aaron. "You, human. You poisoned the princess with your weakness. I will end you, and the throne will follow." He charged, his blade cutting through the air. Aaron raised his weapon, but the force of the blow drove him to his knees. Sparks flew as steel met steel. His arms shook with the effort, but he held firm. Lyra rushed forward, striking with her staff. Light burst against Varrock's chest, forcing him back. Aaron seized the chance, striking low, unbalancing the traitor. Together, human and princess pressed forward, their movements in harmony. Finally, the Queen herself rose from her throne. With a single strike of her golden blade, she brought Varrock to the ground. Silence fell as the traitor collapsed, his rebellion broken. The remaining rebels fled or surrendered. Guards secured the hall, and the flames of battle began to fade. The queen stood tall, her voice filling the chamber. The throne stands. The rebellion falls. Let all remember that loyalty, not treachery, holds this empire together. She turned to Aaron, her gaze steady. Tonight, you fought not as an outsider, but as one of us. Your courage saved my daughter and this throne. I will not forget. Lyra looked at him, her eyes filled with quiet pride. I told them you would stand with us. Now they see it. Aaron's body ached, his breath heavy, but his heart was strong. He had not planned to be here, yet he had become part of something greater than himself. He had stood in the heart of an empire's storm and had not broken. But as he looked around the hall, he knew this was not the end. The rebellion had been struck down, yet shadows still lingered. There would be more battles ahead. For now, though, the throne was safe. And for the first time, Aaron truly believed he had a place in the story, not as a stranger, but as a defender of a future that was only beginning. The palace still carried the scars of battle. Stone walls bore the marks of fire, and broken banners lay scattered across the floor. Yet amid the silence after the storm, there was hope. The rebellion had been crushed, its leader defeated, and the throne still stood firm. But victory alone was not enough. The people of the empire had watched the events with doubt and fear. Many still whispered that the choice of a human could not bring strength to their future. The queen knew that if peace was to last, she would need to make a declaration that none could deny. In the great throne hall, preparations began for a gathering unlike any before. Nobles, soldiers, and citizens were invited to witness the queen's words. The hall was rebuilt in haste, torches burning bright, golden banners lifted high, and guards standing proud at every corner. Aaron stood at the side, uneasy. His body still ached from battle, but it was not his wounds that troubled him. It was the weight of expectation. He had not come to this empire seeking honor or a place in its heart. Yet here he was, at the center of its future. Princess Lyra approached him with quiet steps. She carried no crown, no weapon, only a calm determination in her eyes. You doubt yourself, she said gently. Aaron gave a small nod. Your people fought for centuries to guard this throne. I am only one man, and not even of your kind. What right do I have to stand here beside you? Her gaze did not falter. You stood when others fled. You defended me when blades fell. You gave loyalty without demand for reward. That is the strength our people need. It is not about blood or birth. It is about heart. Her words steadied him, though questions still turned in his mind. Before he could answer, the sound of horns filled the hall. It was time. The queen entered, draped in robes of deep crimson and gold. Her presence commanded silence, and the hall bowed before her. She raised her staff high, its gem glowing like a star. People of the empire, her voice rang out, tonight we rise not from ruin, but from renewal. The rebellion is broken, yet its shadow teaches us a truth: we cannot remain bound by fear of change. Strength is found not in walls, but in unity. She gestured toward Aaron and Lyra, standing together at the center of the hall. My daughter has chosen. She has placed her trust in a human, and through her choice, we have seen courage greater than pride, loyalty stronger than fear, and hope brighter than doubt. Tonight, we seal this bond, not only between them, but between our people and humanity. The hall rippled with murmurs. Some faces showed uncertainty, but others nodded with respect. Soldiers who had fought beside Aaron looked at him with pride, remembering his bravery. Aaron felt the eyes of the empire upon him. His heart pounded, yet he stood tall, not for himself, but for the princess beside him. The queen lifted her staff once more. Aaron of Earth, do you swear your loyalty to this empire, to stand as protector of my daughter and guardian of our future? Aaron's voice was steady. I swear it. With all that I am, I will stand with her, and with your people, as long as I draw breath. The queen turned to Lyra. And you, my daughter, do you stand by this choice, knowing it will shape not only your path but the path of all who follow? Lyra's eyes shone with resolve. I do. I choose him, not for what he is, but for who he has shown himself to be. In him, I see the strength our people need. The queen struck her staff to the ground. The hall trembled with a deep, echoing sound that carried through the walls. Then so it shall be. Human and air are bound, and through this bond, our empire takes its next step. The hall erupted in voices. Some cheered, some argued, but none could deny the queen's word. The declaration had been made, and the bond was sealed. Aaron felt Lyra's hand slip into his. In that moment, the doubts faded. He was no longer only a visitor from a distant world. He was part of something greater, a bridge between two peoples, a symbol of unity born in fire and trial. Later that night, when the hall had emptied and silence returned, Aaron and Lyra stood on the balcony overlooking the city. Lights glimmered across the streets, and the air carried the sound of distant celebration. You are no longer alone, Lyra said softly. Your path has joined with ours. Aaron looked at her, then at the stars above. I never thought this would be my journey. But if this is where I'm meant to be, then I will walk it proudly. The queen's words still echoed in his mind. Human, my daughter has chosen you. Once, those words had filled him with fear and confusion. Now, they carried honor, and a promise of a future he would fight to protect. The empire was not yet free of challenges. Shadows would rise again, and new trials would come. But with unity forged in trust and courage, they would face whatever lay ahead. For now, there was peace. And in that peace, a human and an alien princess stood side by side, chosen not by chance, but by choice, ready to guide their people into a new dawn.